What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Shuhei Yoshida and an interesting comment he made about remasters and remakes too. Kind of funny. So the guy's left, right? He left PlayStation, and I really respect the guy. I really like the guy. I go back in my head to the Podcast Beyond days with Greg and Colin and all them, and just some of the fun discussions that they'd had. But he's a very knowledgeable guy. He was the head of first-party studios for a time, moved over to Indies, was the head of Indies, and he's very influential in terms of, games that he likes and games that he pushes. He's a guy who's, in the know, and I think his opinion has weight, and that's why I kind of want to talk about it in this video. He talks about remasters and remakes, and he talks about why he thinks people, should support it, and slash, kind of misconceptions, right? I think that was the actual question, was, what misconceptions do you think people have about PlayStation, about these types of games? And he talked about remasters and remakes. So while I love the guy, I do kind of take issue a little bit with, it is his opinion, but again, this was a guy that was very high up, and he's been there for decades. I wonder how much his opinion reflects what PlayStation's opinion is, okay? So let's talk about remasters and remakes. Basically, what he said is it's another way of funneling in money into the new games that they make, and how he thinks that people should kind of go easier on remasters and remakes because there's kind of a greater plan overall. Now, here's the thing. Want to be very transparent. I don't disagree with all of that. In fact, the idea of that money stream, right? It's something we talk about even with live service stuff. While I'm not a fan, I think they handled it wrong, went into it wrong, all that jazz. Is there a purpose to live service beyond just, we want to make a game that's in the top 10 of Steam player base? Yes, it's another revenue service. It's another way that you can get money coming in all the time, and you can funnel that back in, and you could even allocate some of it to things that you're really, really good at, which is those single player, experiences, right? Okay, well, it's kind of the same with remasters and remakes. You make these things, you make them for cheap, right? You're not taking away resources. He said that. He said, PlayStation and Sony, they basically separate these teams, and they have divisions and studios in general that work on these remakes and remasters, and they don't take away from everything that's already going on. So it's not like you're slowing something down to make a remaster or remake of a game. And again, I agree with that part too. You shouldn't. You should find studios that are really good at it and specialize at it and have them just focus on that, right, while everybody else does something else. I totally agree. And again, you make it for cheap. It's not taking years and years. It takes maybe 2-3 years to do it, maybe even less. You get these games out quick, they make some money, and you barely spent anything on them. That's just extra revenue. Now, where does that revenue go? Well, he says it goes to these new, large, I think he said that though, and again, that's where I start to take a little, I think there's some problems there, right? It goes to these really big new, AAA kind of, next-gen games. And so my issue with it is really about, I would say, what those remasters and remakes are. Because, again, one of the main parts of that conversation was he thinks people need to take it a little bit easier on the remasters and remakes. And this is actually where I'll side with the audience. I'll side with the consumer base because, in my opinion, I've actually defended a lot of remasters and remakes. Actually, I've defended it more than even I've seen online in my own comments. I support them, I think, more than, some people that I see. But I support, I would say, pretty specific remasters and remakes. I think it's kind of a couple different issues, right? When people are seeing all these remasters and remakes coming out, and it's not matching up with the new games coming out, people think that Sony is prioritizing the wrong thing. And I do think that's an optics issue that's on PlayStation, right? I get that they're cheaper, I get that they're faster, all that jazz, but when you are, honestly, I think, struggling the last half decade at putting out quicker games, brand new games. I've always said I have no problems with remasters and remakes, but there needs to be a balance. In fact, there should actually always be more of the new than of the old. I'm a huge supporter of supporting the old, but you need to have the new. And when the new lags behind and all you see is, they're remastering The Last of Us Part 2 that just came out, but we don't even have the next game from Naughty Dog, that looks bad. And that whose fault is that? Well, that is PlayStation. That's Naughty Dog. dog. That's the system. So I get the people's kind of complaints with it. And I guess really you can break that up into another issue. It's also what games they're choosing to remaster and remake, right? For me, I've shut up in the past when they have remastered or remade games that I really like. That's a biasness, but you have such a portfolio, old games, right? And when you keep going back to Horizon, God of War, God of War, I don't actually think it's gotten one, but it probably will eventually. You'll get a God of War thing at one point. But, when you go back to Horizon and Last of Us, and when there becomes those kind of memes and just that kind of comedy to The Last of Us Part 1, Last of Us Part 2, remakes and then remasters. And when people make jokes about like The Last of Us 2 getting remade, it's a joke, but jokes are oftentimes the funniest when they're rooted in a little bit of reality, right? Got to be a little something that's truthful so it can kind of sting a little and make you kind of laugh at it. That's what that is the fact that I could see it. I think all of us could see Last of Us Part 2 getting a remake. And again, that therein lies the issue. It's about what you're picking. It's about the speed. It's a couple different things, but they really go hand in hand. I think they're doubling down on just the newest, biggest things. They have I always talk about Sly Cooper, right? That's that biasness, but you have so many PS2, PS3, and even PS3. I talk about Gravity Rush. Gravity Rush made it to the PS4 era. You have games in all of these generations that are just sitting there deader than anything. I don't even know if it's a word. You just have games that are rotting, and instead you're tripling down on Horizon. So look, it's okay that the revenue you make from the remasters go towards Horizon 3. I don't really think people would blame you for that, but there's actually, maybe you could. Maybe there's something else to that as well. Where does the money? How does the money get allocated? Well, do you have to put it just towards the next big thing? See, that was another kind of issue I had with how he said it. How about you don't even need to allocate the money you're making from these remasters to all these big things? How about you do some small things too, right? It seems like PlayStation's strategy is isolating the few big things that they've done in the past 8 years, right? Because if you go back to like 2017, actually I believe that is 8 years, right? That's Horizon. So you go back to that, maybe even go back to The Last of Us in 2013. So like 10 or so years. They're isolating the biggest thing in the 10 or so years, saying screw off to everything that came before it, remastering and remaking those over and over and over. And then they're using that money, to make the same 5 properties. And also when games take so long to develop and to come out, it stretches the whole thing out. Hopefully a lot of this stuff makes sense. I think he also said in that interview that a thing that people don't always look at is, who it's kind of targeting. And I did see this in the comments too, kind of defending it, where, maybe I'm not the demographic. I'm not the person that they're looking to buy The Last of Us Part 1 remaster. But the thing, I really hopefully countered that viewpoint in the last couple minutes here, because the issue is that you're really only taking a segment of your history. You're picking the same 4 or 5 things, you're remastering and remaking those same 4 or 5 things, and you're limiting it to just like the last 10 years. You're really not messing with too much before. So that really is kind of my big issue with this whole thing. Even you look at the TV shows and the movies, like which ones, you did Uncharted and they're doing Gravity Rush, so there's a little bit of desire to kind of like go all over the place, but you are getting Horizon. Horizon's becoming a movie, right? You are getting God of War. Helldivers is getting a movie. Helldivers just came out. So yeah, it's smart in a way. You're choosing something that just did really big, and then you're kind of doubling down on it. You have to have a willingness to do that, but I believe there needs to be more things that are spread out, right? So going back again to that base question, like, should we support these things? Well, number one, you support whatever you want to support, but I don't think it's as cut and dry as like how he made it out to be. I don't actually think it's always going for the demographic that they think it's going for. I think what they don't really recognize is that it pisses people off. When you have a Horizon and then you do a remaster and a remake and all this stuff, it makes people think, well, we just did this. You're focusing on the same couple of games and you're forgetting everything that came before. I harped on the idea that Guerrilla Games did not even celebrate when Killzone had an anniversary like a month ago. They tweet fan art and all this stuff of Horizon. They tweet only Horizon. Killzone literally has a massive anniversary anniversary, day goes by, they do nothing. And to me, that just shows the lack of care for where you came from. But I mean, that's one element. I made a video talking about it. But you take some steps back, and again, is that the mindset of PlayStation? They just don't care. They are only here to isolate a few different things. So that's the tough thing. I'm not actually against remasters and remakes. I believe in preservation, and one way to preserve things is to remake them, is to remaster them, is to kind of push them along for newer audiences. And here's the thing. It actually, what he says about like going for different demographics, that makes sense for the older games. You think everybody, if they did a Resistance remaster, you're playing, hopefully, to brand new people. Many people, Resistance didn't even sell well. Now you could say, okay, well, Alex, then why would you remaster it? It sold okay, and it's a legacy type thing. And we just talked about it. Remasters are cheap. There's ways out of this, or you can get out of any conversation with a little bit of intellect there. But he said that, right? They don't cost a lot of money. They don't take a lot of time. Who are you hurting making a Resistance remaster? You're doing a couple things, right? You are moving it forward. You're preserving it. You're bringing it to a brand new group of players. You're doing it for cheap. Any extra money you make can just funnel into the next Last of Us game or something, right? It's not really hurting. Who's it hurting? You know what I mean? And also, it shows that you're willing to branch out and push out a little bit, and instead they choose to not do that. So that is, I will say, he answered a couple interesting questions. I like the guy, but I don't know. I really, his opinion does remind me, or makes me think of PlayStation's opinion, which they have kind of proven to almost be the same thing. And I hope that's not, it is, I think, how they think. Truly, like, I mean, let's just cut through the BS. I really think they don't care about a lot of their history and a lot of these, like, almost hidden potential type things. I think they need miracles like Astrobot to kind of remind them of certain things, because I just think they forget, don't care, hate, whatever you want to say. And I think they need, like, the Astrobots of the world to kind of wake them up from time to time. That's the sad thing. And I don't think he's coming at it maliciously, by the way, but that mindset is just, well, I get it. I get remasters and remakes, but you're playing to the same couple franchises, which gets old. You're remastering and remaking things too early. You got games stuck on PS2 and PS3 that are far older than the last 5 remasters that's been done. Even though they've been done well, it's not even like they're bad qualities. They're doing a really good job. But you got so many games that deserve that treatment that would show that willingness to branch out and just, I think, really optically help them. And also, it's cheap, and also, it doesn't matter if it sells 500,000 and doesn't do all that well. You just said that they're cheap. And by the way, are you really relying on remasters and remakes to fund the next, like, Horizon game? Shouldn't those be able to kind of fund themselves? They cost a lot of money, take a lot of time, and then they come out. You want them to then make a lot of money to then make the next one. Like, isn't that the point? If you need other things, if you need remasters to help you make Spider-Man 3, I think that Spider-Man 3 part is something's wrong there. Does that make sense? I think actually you need to look at the biggest games you're making and say, okay, if these aren't self-sustainable, which they're probably not, if they can't handle themselves on their own, then maybe we should, like, rethink that, because we can't keep relying on other divisions to kind of help God of War be made. You know what I mean? That's something actually I'm just thinking about now, but the video is far too long, so we'll stop it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.